Hello, thank you for joining me at Bert's Books, where this time I'll be getting into an area I haven't covered much, largely because I don't read a lot of it. I'm not that into that kind of sword and sorcery or whatever you want to call it, fantasy, epic type of fiction. Now, I sort of have made an exception for, I do enjoy the original Conan film and the novel of it, which I haven't mentioned before. I do have a copy of it. I've been meaning to get into that for some time, but haven't got around to it yet. However, the other day, I swung past a charity shop after work, and for a quid, I got this, which I was aware. I've been aware of this series since I was a kid. I used to see them on the shelves, and I'd always assumed they were a kind of cut price Conan sort of deal, a sort of mass market fantasy epic sort of fiction. Never picked one up until now. Now the preamble seemed to confirm my preconceptions about these. There's a bit of dialogue here. Have you a taste, lads? Called, I'm going to do this in a silly voice, by the way. Have you a taste, lads? Called Polycrates, for precious wines and delicate viands. There's a certain kind of language in common to the Conan one as well. There's this weird English that I suppose like sort of this bastardization of Dark Ages or whatever however people imagined English was spoken then. But there's this strange way of speaking and vocabulary, hence viands. That we have, Captain, called a man. Have you a taste for well-tooled leather and fine clothes? Yes, Captain, called men. Have you a taste for more gold and silver and jewels than you know what to do with? Called Polycrates. Yes, Captain, called dozens of men. Have you a taste for luscious slaves to train with whips for your pleasure? Yes, Captain. Called hundreds of men. I heard weapons unsheathed and clashed. Yes, Captain, shouted hundreds of men. Then, lads, cried Polycrates, take the port of Victoria. She is yours. Rah! So it's starting to sound like, if you've ever seen that film 300, like a sort of, this is 1982, like a sort of precursor to that or a very sweaty episode of He-Man. So anyway, I started getting into the main thing, and it seems to be that this setting seems almost like, I don't know, I couldn't place it, whether it like almost pseudo-classical. The narrator, Jason, I think his name is, he seems to be part of this fleet. It's a naval battle it starts with, incidentally. He seems to be part of this fleet that seems sort of Grecian or Roman in sort of nature, and they're pitted against a fleet of pirates who have this vaguely Nordic sounding name. The more Mediterranean, I suppose, have blocked off their harbour with a big, huge chain, which these pirates are sort of gradually hacking away at. Anyway, this naval battle bit goes on a lot, and there's an awful lot of describing every bloody thing the chief oarsman said. Back, lads, forward, lads. There's a lot of kind of unnecessary dialogue in there, so I was a little bit deterred by that. So I thought try some background reading on this. Let's see what's behind this. Yes, so anyway, gore, it wasn't just churned out by some, jobbing pulp hack. It was the work of a philosophy professor, no less, John Langer, but written as John Norman. The series started in 1966 with Tarnsman of Gore. If you don't know what a Tarnsman is, neither do I. And said to be vaguely inspired by some of the works of Edgar Rice Burroughs. Anyway, John Norman or John Langer didn't stop there. This went to 38 titles, of which this is number 16. Now, reading a little further, it appears that the sort of philosophy that John Lang is into is thought of as perhaps slightly problematic. And somewhere or other there's a quote from, I think attributed to Michael Moorcock, saying that while he wasn't normally an advocate for censorship, that he does think these gore books should have been stocked on the top shelf. Now, there wasn't a lot to object to other than the sort of repetition in the first section of this. It's when the narrator Jason forces his way onto one of the opposing fleet's flagships and breaks into the captain's bedroom from the seaward side. And there he encounters, for the first time in the narrative of this, he encounters a woman.
You're a woman.
Yes, I hope that's not a problem.
That's where you start to see what the problem is with this. There's this big kinky sort of BDSM slavery thing going on in this, and Jason's dealings with the woman, her given name is Luther, but Jason declares himself her master now, and that she will now henceforth be called Shirley, and she demonstrates a bit of resilience at this point. So he grabs a whip off the wall, and yeah, by the end of which she is compliant. And then we get into the kind of philosophical thought behind some of this. It is no wonder that the institution of slavery provides the human female in all her sensitivities and vulnerabilities, in all her psychophysical complexity, with the deepest fulfillments and most exquisite emotions she can know. Yeah, there's more like that. Briefly put, the second reason that Earth girls make such astoundingly desirable slaves is that they have been in their Earth years subjected in effect to sexual and emotional starvation. They have laboured in a fruitless desert, often not understanding the causes of their own. So basically the gist is that women find their true fulfillment through this sort of treatment. So after a dose of Jason's particular brand of medicine, she is then giving it, "Forgive a slave for having been displeasing my master," she begged. Yeah. Gore, incidentally, is described as counter-Earth, the idea, I think, being that it is counter-orbital. The sun is between us and Gore, hence we can never observe Gore from our own planet, but it's like a sort of weird mirror of ours, except that it is, I think, ruled over by these strange priest-type things that do have the ability, they have a greater technology or level of ability than the general human inhabitants of Gore. The inhabitants are kind of maintained at a restrained technological level, loosely at that of kind of ancient civilizations here. I think that's the kind of idea of it. The attitudes. Now, this sort of thing, it must have been big when I was a kid. Every, like W.H. Smith's, every station bookshop had these things, but it's obviously not so fashionable now. However, gather there is a bit of a cult around it, a subculture, if you like, a fandom, Gorian subculture developed independently of Norman's involvement. Fans alleged due to controversy and pressure from feminist circles, the books went out of print in the late 80s, although they've since been republished this century. There's a Gorian subculture focusing on the master and slave dynamic in sexual relationships and associated forms of female submission as portrayed in the novels. I don't know. Like I say, I'm fit, while I was aware of these for many years, it's my first actual exposure to them, and it all seems a bit teenage fantasy or the guy living in his mum's basement sort of stuff. And I kind of should have known that this would be the case, right? It's not the first book I've discussed where the author has also produced a sex manual, Imaginative Sex, by John Norman, focusing on aspects such as total power exchange. Yeah, I don't know how much more I need to know about that. I don't know if I'm going to get all the way through this. It's the kind of action stuff is it's over padded with dialogue. Guess that's what passes for a sex scene in this. Yeah, a bit troubling. So I might have to. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to go out of my way to pick up more of these. It's interesting as artwork gives it away. Incidentally, the moment I picked this up, I ran into somebody I knew. So I'm kind of, oh, hello, kind of thing. She didn't ask thankfully, she didn't ask what I just bought. Presumably that makes me the kind of emasculated Earthman that is sort of mentioned in that earlier passage. But I don't know. I would think I would have to file this under the savage sword of Onan.